Hello and welcome, I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. An Israeli airstrike strikes the coastal city of Tyre in Lebanon, killing at least one person. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam says his country is at risk of being thrown into a new war, as dozens of airstrikes kill at least 5 others. An Israeli airstrike has killed a top Hamas political leader in Gaza. Locals say the airstrike killed Salah al-Bardweel, his wife and another party official. The mayor of Istanbul appears in court for the first time since his arrest on corruption and terrorism charges. This comes as protests in favour of the mayor sweep cities throughout Turkey. The Israeli opposition leader calls for a general strike if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to obey a Supreme Court decision freezing the government's dismissal of the security chief. This comes as thousands of Israelis protest the dismissal of Shin Bet. Wildfires in South Korea have killed 4 and displaced hundreds from their homes. Firefighters are scrambling to control the blaze in the country's south. In Sudan, at least 45 people have been killed in a paramilitary attack in North Darfur. Fighting erupted in the April of 2023 and has since then been marked with ongoing atrocities and countless civilian casualties. US envoy Steve Witkoff dismisses UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's plan for international support for a ceasefire in Ukraine. Donald Trump's special envoy says the idea was based on a simplistic notion UK Prime Minister and other European leaders have in thinking we have all got to be like Winston Churchill. After 5 weeks in hospital, Pope Francis is discharged. His time at Rome Gemelli Hospital has come to an end after a doctor said that there was risks to the pontiff's life. Starting off, the Palestine Red Crescent Society says it has lost contact with several paramedics after Israeli forces surrounded their ambulances in the southern city of Rafah. Meanwhile, Trump's advisor Mike Waltz called the president's proposal to forcibly resettle Palestinians from Gaza a practical idea and said he believes rebuilding the Strip just to see terrorists attack all over again is the definition of insanity. Israel has launched a new wave of airstrikes across Gaza targeting senior Hamas officials. One strike in Khan Yunis killed Hamas political leader Salah al-Bardweel and his wife, according to Hamas officials. Hamas has condemned the strike as an assassination. The group claims Bardweel was praying when an Israeli strike hit his tent shelter. Israel has not yet commented on his death. The attack comes amid growing pressure on Hamas. The Palestinian faction Fatah is urging the group to step aside, warning that its continued rule in Gaza could threaten the existence of Palestinians in the territory. Israel is facing growing political tensions as opposition leader Yair Lapid has called for a general strike if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to obey a Supreme Court order. The court has blocked the Netanyahu government's decision to dismiss the Shin Bet chief Ronan Bar, a move that has sparked 3 days of protests. Thousands have gathered in Tel Aviv, waving Israeli flags and demanding Netanyahu reverse his decision to dismiss the internal security chief. Protesters are accusing Netanyahu of undermining democracy and endangering national security. Some say his government is trying to control the country's security agencies for political gain. Netanyahu has defended his decision, saying only the government can choose who leads Shin Bet. He insists Israel will remain a democracy despite the court's intervention. However, critics argue his actions are pushing the country into a constitutional crisis. Let's take a listen to what Netanyahu and Lapid had to say.
תחליט לא לציית לפסיקת בית המשפט, היא תהפוך את עצמה באותו יום, באותו רגע, לממשלה עבריינית. אם זה יקרה, באותו רגע המדינה כולה צריכה לעצור. יש מערכת אחת שלא יכולה לעצור, זו מערכת הביטחון. אנחנו נגד כל סרבנות, אבל חוץ מזה, הכל. המשק צריך לשבות, הכנסת צריכה לשבות, בתי המשפט צריכים לשבות, הרשויות המקומיות צריכות לשבות, לא רק האוניברסיטאות, בתי הספר צריכים לשבות.
רונן בר לא יישאר ראש השב"כ, לא תהיה מלחמת אחים, וישראל תישאר מדינה דמוקרטית.
And now we stay in the Middle East, where Israeli airstrikes and artillery fire pounded southern Lebanon, killing at least 8 people. This comes after Israel intercepted rockets launched across the border. The attacks mark a sharp escalation in hostilities, threatening a fragile truce that ended last year's deadly war between Israel and Hezbollah. Israel's health ministry confirmed fatalities in Tyre, a coastal city hit in a second wave of Israeli strikes. Another attack in Quelle wounded 4. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam warned that Israel's military operations risk plunging Lebanon into a new war. Israel's military says it was targeting Hezbollah positions in response to ongoing rocket fire. Strikes were also reported in Siquim, southeast of Tyre. Regional leaders are calling for urgent diplomatic intervention to prevent further escalation. US envoy Steve Witkoff has rejected UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's proposal for international backing of a ceasefire in Ukraine. Donald Trump's former special envoy criticised the plan, describing it as a simplistic approach, with the UK Prime Minister and other European leaders operating under the misguided belief that they must emulate Winston Churchill. Meanwhile, Russia targeted Ukrainian military airfields, ammunition depots and troop positions in the past 24 hours. The Russian Defense Ministry reported shooting down a Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter jet and over 100 drones, while intercepting aerial bombs and rockets. Russian forces also struck Ukrainian positions along the Kursk front lines. Meanwhile, Ukraine's military repelled Russian attacks in Kharkiv, Pokrovsk and the Kursk. Additionally, Ukraine's air force hit a Russian command post near Belgorod border. Staying in the crisis, Russia's overnight drone strike on Kiev left at least 7 injured and set high-rise buildings ablaze, Ukrainian officials reported. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko confirmed 1 hospitalization as emergency crews tackled fires across multiple districts. Falling drone debris ignited flames in the Podol and Dniprovsky areas. Kiev's military chief Timur Karenko stated, "The full scale of the assault remains uncertain, though blasts likely from air defense responses were heard." In the surrounding region, 2 more people were injured and several homes suffered damage, according to the regional governor. Moscow has yet to respond. Meanwhile, the US is advocating for a ceasefire to shield energy infrastructure, but hostilities persist. Kiev and eastern Ukraine have endured over 5 hours of air raid alerts overnight. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have stationed new missile system on Greater Tumb, Lesser Tumb and Abu Musa near the Strait of Hormuz, capable of targeting enemy bases, vessels and assets within 600 kilometers. The deployment follows recent military drills and coincides with Iran's pending response to a letter from US President Donald Trump, urging nuclear talks while warning of military action. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei dismissed US threats, vowing retaliation against any hostility. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi viewed Trump's letter as more of a danger but acknowledged potential opportunities. The US maintains its goal of building trust with Tehran. Iran has controlled the disputed islands since 1971, despite long-standing UAE claims. Here's what Commander Alexera Tengsiri said.
و دارایی‌های دشمن در منطقه را ما قادر هستیم که اینها را مورد هجوم واقع بدیم.
Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu appeared in court for questioning. Prosecutors grilled him over allegations of corruption and links to terrorism. He has denied those charges. His detention earlier this week sparked nationwide protests. Prosecutors are seeking his imprisonment along with 4 aides ahead of a trial. A court ruling on his detention is expected today. Meanwhile, thousands gathered outside Istanbul's municipal building in Saraçhane, defying a ban on street demonstrations. The restriction, initially imposed in the city, has now been extended until March the 26th. Demonstrations have spread to 55 of Turkey's 81 provinces. The unrest marks the country's largest street protests in more than a decade. Yesterday, riot police moved in on protesters at City Hall. Officers fired tear gas, forcing many to take shelter inside the building. According to media reports, multiple arrests were made, but official figures remain unclear. CHP leader Özgür Özel addressed the crowd, claiming that over 500,000 protesters had gathered. Turkey's Journalists Union reports that many were beaten, shot with rubber bullets, and had their equipment destroyed. Reporters Without Borders condemned the violence, calling it heavy-handed and completely arbitrary. The group is demanding accountability and punishment for those responsible.
Sokaklara çıkarak yanına sol örgütleri, marjinalleri, vandalları alarak milli iradeye parmak sallama dönemleri artık geride kalmıştır. Sokak terörü üzerinden siyasete ve adalete istikamet çizildiği günler eski Türkiye ile birlikte tamamen mazide kalmıştır.
To the United Kingdom now, where the British government has launched an investigation into the country's energy resilience. This comes after a fire at an electrical substation that shut down Heathrow Airport for nearly a day. While the airport is now fully operational, thousands of passengers remain stranded, and airlines warn that disruptions could last for days. Labour politician Toby Harris called the incident a huge embarrassment, questioning how one fire could cripple Europe's busiest air hub. British Airways, Heathrow's main carrier, operated around 90% of its schedule on Saturday and expects a near full service by Sunday. Officials are now probing the UK's ability to protect critical infrastructure as calls grow for stronger safeguards. Staying in Europe, thousands of people marched in Paris and other cities across France to protest against racism and the rise of the far right. The protests came amid a shift to the right in French politics. The current government has promised to tighten immigration rules and border controls. In Paris, clashes broke out between police and some demonstrators. Authorities say 2 people were arrested and 3 were injured, including a riot police officer. Many protesters carried signs warning about the rise of the far right in policies in France and beyond. Some also criticised the United States with placards linking Donald Trump to the rise of the ideology in Europe. The protesters took place one day after the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Human rights groups say France is seeing a dangerous rise in racist and anti-Semitic acts. Let's take a listen to what some of the protesters had to say.
Parce que déjà, en tant que Français, je pense que c'est important de pouvoir défendre nos valeurs. D'autant plus avec la montée de l'extrême droite, c'est important pour nous, notre génération, d'être conscient de ce qui se passe en ce moment. Et voilà, donc on est là pour défendre nos droits et nos...
On est en train de nous entraîner là, vers la division, vers la violence, vers l'injustice raciste. Et avec les idées d'extrême droite, je trouve très important qu'on soit nombreux pour dire c'est pas ça la France. La France, c'est un projet politique. C'est un projet où tout le monde est français dans la mesure où on a le même projet politique, qui est celui de la Révolution française, de la République, de la démocratie, etc. Donc je trouve que c'est très important que le plus de gens possible soient là, parce que sinon c'est la haine, c'est la division, c'est le malheur. Il ne faut pas de ça.
Pope Francis is set to be discharged from the hospital today after battling pneumonia for over 2 weeks. However, doctors say he will need at least 2 months of rest at the Vatican. The 88-year-old pontiff was admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital on February the 14th with severe respiratory infections. He became the most serious health crisis of his 12-year papacy. Dr. Sergio Alfieri, the head of the Pope's medical team, stressed the importance of a full convalescence. He advised against large meetings or any activity that requires significant effort. Francis suffered from double pneumonia and experienced 4 acute respiratory crises while in the hospital. 2 of them were critical, putting his life in danger. Doctors say he is no longer battling pneumonia, but the infection was complex and involved multiple microorganisms. Dr. Luigi Carbone from the Vatican's healthcare service confirmed that a nurse would care for the Pope at his Vatican residence. It also announced that Francis will make his first public appearance over 5 weeks today. So far, the Pope has only been seen in a single photo released last week, showing him in prayer at a hospital chapel.
Father will be discharged tomorrow, as we said before, in a stable clinical condition with a prescription to partially continue drug therapy and a convalescence and rest period at least 2 months.
Over to the continent of Africa, where M23 rebels vow to withdraw from Wakele, citing peace efforts, but Congo's army remains doubtful. The move follows M23's last-minute pullout from planned talks with Congo's government due to EU sanctions on its leaders. While Congo urges action, officials suspect that rebels are advancing towards Mubi after supply routes were cut. M23's westward push has brought them within 400 kilometers of Kisangani. The conflict, fueled by Rwanda's 1994 genocide and mineral disputes, has defied ceasefires. Congo accuses Rwanda of aiding M23, but Kigali denies involvement, claiming self-defense. M23 insists on direct talks with Kinshasa. Major landmarks across the globe went dark on Saturday night for Earth Hour. Earth Hour has been observed annually since 2007. The Wildlife Federation invited landmarks and homes worldwide to turn off their lights for an hour to raise awareness of climate change and environmental issues. This year, as these iconic landmarks dimmed their lights, the WWF asked people around the world to give an hour for Earth. In New York City, the Empire State Building dimmed its lights. The Parthenon atop the Acropolis in Athens also went dark. The Eiffel Tower joined in, turning off its lights for several minutes. Bangkok's Grand Palace and Wat Phra Kew, home to the Emerald Buddha, participated in also dimming their lights. In New Delhi, India Gate also turned its lights off for an hour. A subway train derailed in Congo-Gu, Seoul at around 7:50 a.m. No injuries have been reported as of 9 a.m. according to the railway authorities. The train was operating on the main section of Seoul Metropolitan Line subway. It was departing from a depot at Sindorim Station when it collided with a buffer and derailed, according to Seoul Metro. Services were halted in the counter-clockwise direction between Seoul National University and Honik University Station. Passengers at affected stations were informed about the delay and advised to use alternative transportation. The train was empty at the time of the incident as it had not yet started operating. Seoul Metro, the state-run company, has set up a response headquarters at Sindorim Station to handle the aftermath of the derailment. A series of deadly wildfires in South Korea's regions have killed at least 4 people, including 3 firefighters, and left hundreds of residents displaced. The fires, which began in Sancheong County on Friday, have spread across several regions, burning over 800 hectares of land. Authorities have mobilized hundreds of firefighters along with helicopters to contain the blazes. The fires have prompted the evacuation of at least 260 residents in Sancheong. and 620 more in Uslang and Gwansang. South Korea's government declared a state of emergency in the affected provinces with severe fire warnings in 12 locations. The fires have also sparked concerns of the safety of public servants, with one confirmed civilian death. As firefighters continue to battle the flames, the nation remains on high alert for further spread of the wildfires. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported a significant rise in Chinese military activities near its borders on Sunday, with 13 Chinese aircraft, 8 vessels and 2 official ships detected around the island. Of the 13 aircraft, 11 crossed the median line into Taiwan's northern, southwestern and eastern air defense identification zones. The MND issued a statement on X confirming the detection and response to these incursions. This comes after a similar incident on Saturday when 47 Chinese aircraft, sorties and 7 vessels were observed, with 41 aircraft crossing into Taiwan's Adige. In a separate development, Taiwan's Coast Guard administration condemned China's illegal fishing activities near the Dongsha Islands in the South China Sea. The CGA reported an influx of Chinese fishing vessels starting on February the 15th, which led to an operation to strengthen patrols and prevent further incursions. US President Donald Trump made a high-profile appearance at the NCAA Wrestling Championships. His visit continues his trend of sports-focused trips during his new term. Trump arrived at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia to loud cheers and a standing ovation. He raised his fist and chants of USA echoed throughout the arena. Trump was joined by billionaire Elon Musk. Upon arrival in Philadelphia, he was greeted by Oklahoma Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, a former MMA fighter. This wasn't Trump's first visit to the NCAA Wrestling Championships. He attended in 2023 when the tournament was held in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as a candidate for re-election. China's second highest leader, Premier Li Qiang, told global business executives in Beijing that the country remains committed to economic globalization despite growing fragmentation. Speaking at the China Development Forum, Li said China would stand on the correct side of history and act as a force for stability. Let's listen to what he had to say.
当今世界经济碎片化加剧，不稳定、不确定上行。 不稳定性、不确定性在上升，在这个时候，我认为更需要我们每个国家要更加的开放市场，我们的各位企业、各家企业都应该更多的共享资源。
His remarks come amid trade tensions with Washington, with Donald Trump's return to the White House, threatening the country's export-driven economy. Beijing has been working to stabilize growth by boosting domestic consumption. Li warned of rising global economic uncertainty, but pledged China would continue practicing true multilateralism. The forum, which opened on Sunday, was attended by top executives, including Apple CEO Tim Cook.
作为负责任的大国，将坚定地站在历史正确的一边，公平 正义的一边，在时代风浪当中，当大义，行正道，坚持经济全球化的正确方向，践行真正的多边主义，努力做全球和平发展事业的稳定性。
A mass shooting at a park in Los Angeles, New Mexico, left 3 people dead and 15 others injured on Friday night. Police say 2 19-year-olds and a 16-year-old were killed when gunfire erupted at an unsanctioned car show in Young Park. Authorities report that around 200 people were present when an altercation between 2 groups escalated, resulting in as many 60 rounds being fired. 7 injured victims were transferred to hospitals in El Paso for further treatment. Las Cruces police chief Jeremy Story said no arrests have been made, but investigators are pursuing multiple leads. The The city's mayor called for unity as the community mourns the tragic loss. Officials are urging witnesses to come forward with any information that could aid the investigation. Here is what the fire chief had to say.
So far reveals that there was an altercation between two groups of people, and that altercation escalated to gunfire between both groups. Several other people were also injured in the crossfire. Officers arrived on the scene and began treating people immediately while trying to deal with the chaos of that situation. Bystanders, some of them had already started administering treatment. Las Cruces Fire arrived very quickly, and they began immediately rendering aid despite the fact that the scene was not secure yet.
Residents have expressed growing concerns over gun violence, calling for stronger safety measures at public events. Former U.S. Attorney Jessica Abba was found dead at her home in Alexandria, Virginia. Reportedly, the police arrived after receiving a call about an unresponsive woman. The 43-year-old was a Biden appointee and resigned earlier this year when Trump took office. The circumstances of her death are under investigation. Abba served as the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia after her appointment in 2021. She had been with the Department of Justice since 2009. The current U.S. Attorney for the district expressed deep sadness, calling her unmatched in her role. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.